she bombed. Completely bombed. 5 minutes of material that died on stage. The Tonight Show audience sat in painful silence. Johnny Carson looked uncomfortable. The producers were already planning how to cut her segment short. This unknown comedian's career was over before it started. But then, something happened that had never happened before. When her set ended and she walked off stage, Johnny did something that shocked his entire crew. He followed her backstage. And what he told her in those 3 minutes, away from the cameras, away from the audience, would launch one of the biggest careers in comedy history. Her name was Joan Rivers, and the night she bombed on The Tonight Show was the night Johnny Carson decided to bet everything on her. March 17, 1965, NBC Studio One in Burbank, California. Joan Rivers was about to make her Tonight Show debut. She was 31 years old and had been doing comedy for 5 years. 5 brutal years. Most comedy clubs wouldn't even let women on stage. The ones that did put them on last, after midnight, when the crowd was drunk or gone. Male comedians treated her like a joke. Club owners treated her like a novelty act. But Joan kept grinding, writing jokes, performing anywhere that would have her, getting better, getting sharper, believing that eventually someone would see what she saw, that she was funny, really funny. The Tonight Show was her shot, the big one, the only one that mattered. If Johnny Carson laughed at your jokes, your career was made. If he invited you to sit on the couch after your set, you were a star. Joan had rehearsed for weeks, every joke, every pause, every gesture. She knew this material backward and forward. She was ready. Or so she thought. Joan walked onto the Tonight Show stage that night wearing her best dress. Her hands were shaking, but she hid it, smiled at the audience, took her position at the microphone, and started her set. The first joke landed okay, some laughs, not huge, but solid. The second joke got less, a few chuckles. By the third joke, the audience was quiet, uncomfortably quiet. Joan could feel it happening, that sinking feeling every comedian knows, when the room turns cold, when your material isn't working, when you're dying up there and there's nothing you can do about it. She pushed through, tried the next joke, then the next, kept going because what else could she do? You can't stop in the middle of a Tonight Show set and say, "Sorry, this isn't working." But nothing landed. The audience sat in painful silence. Some people coughed, others looked away. Johnny Carson, sitting at his desk, had that frozen smile he got when something wasn't working. Ed McMahon looked uncomfortable. The camera operators didn't know where to point. 5 minutes that felt like 5 hours. When Joan finally finished her set, there was polite applause, the kind you give out of sympathy, the kind that tells you exactly how badly you just failed. She didn't get invited to the couch. That was the ultimate rejection. If Johnny didn't ask you over after your set, it meant you weren't worth talking to. Joan walked off stage with her head down, fighting back tears. Her career was over. She knew it. Everyone watching knew it. Every club owner in America had just seen her bomb on national television. Joan made it to her dressing room before she completely fell apart. She sat down in front of the mirror and cried. Not gentle tears, full, heaving sobs. 5 years of struggle, 5 years of being told women weren't funny. 5 years of believing that if she just worked hard enough, if she was just good enough, she'd make it. And she'd blown her chance. Her Tonight Show appearance wasn't just bad, it was career-ending bad. No club would book her now. No producer would take her seriously. She was done. Joan started packing her things, her makeup, her notes, the dress she'd bought specifically for this appearance. She just wanted to get out of NBC, get back to New York and figure out what else she could do with her life. Because comedy clearly wasn't it. That's when there was a knock on the door. "Come in," Joan said, wiping her eyes, expecting a production assistant telling her she needed to clear out. The door opened. Johnny Carson walked in. Joan stood up immediately, mortified. Johnny Carson was standing in her dressing room, the biggest star on television, and she'd just humiliated herself on his show. "Mr. Carson, I'm so sorry." Johnny held up his hand. "Where are you going?" "Home, back to New York. I'm sorry about tonight. I know that was terrible." Johnny looked at her for a long moment. Then he said something Joan never expected to hear. "You're funny." Joan blinked. "What?" "You're funny. You just picked the wrong material for this audience." "Mr. Carson, I bombed. Everyone saw it. Joan." Johnny sat down in the chair across from her. "Can I tell you something? I've been doing this show for 3 years. I've seen hundreds of comedians. Most of them are fine. They do their 5 minutes, get some laughs, go home. But every once in a while, I see someone who has something special, something real. You have that." Joan couldn't believe what she was hearing. "But I died out there." "So what? You think I've never bombed? You think every comedian hasn't died on stage? That's not what matters. What matters is the talent underneath, and you've got it." Joan sat down slowly. "I don't understand." Johnny leaned forward. "The jokes you were telling tonight? They're good jokes, but they're not you. You were trying to do what you thought the Tonight Show wanted. I watched you, and I could see you holding back, playing it safe. But the funny stuff, the really funny stuff, is when you stop being careful and just be yourself." "I was being myself." "No, you weren't. You were being what you thought I wanted you to be, and that's why it didn't work." Johnny stood up. "Here's what we're going to do. I'm booking you again. 2 weeks from now." Joan stared at him. "You're what?" "You're coming back. And this time, you're going to do the material you really want to do, not the safe stuff. The stuff that scares you a little, the stuff that makes you think, can I say this on television? That's the stuff that's funny. Mr. Carson, I can't ask you to, you're not asking, I'm telling you. You're coming back, and you're going to kill, because I know you can." Joan felt tears coming again, but different tears this time. "Why are you doing this?" Johnny smiled. "Because somebody did it for me once. When I was starting out, I had people who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. Now it's my turn." He walked to the door, then turned back. "Joan, you've got something special. Don't waste it by quitting after one bad night. Comedy is hard. Television is harder. But you're tougher than you think you are." Then he left. Joan sat in that dressing room for another 20 minutes, trying to process what had just happened. Johnny Carson, the biggest star in television, had just bet on her, had just given her a second chance when she didn't deserve one. She wasn't going to waste it. 2 weeks later, Joan Rivers walked back onto the Tonight Show stage. But this time, she was different. She didn't do the safe material. She didn't try to be what she thought Johnny wanted. She was herself. Raw, honest, self-deprecating Joan Rivers. The Joan who made brutal jokes about her looks, her dating life, her failures. And the audience loved it. They laughed, really laughed, the kind of laughs that tell you you've connected, that you've found your voice. When she finished her set, Johnny was beaming. He invited her over to the couch, talked to her for 10 minutes, told America, "This is someone you're going to be seeing a lot more of." He was right. Johnny didn't just book Joan once more. He booked her 17 times in the next year. 17 appearances when most comedians were lucky to get one. Each time, Joan got better, more confident, more herself. Johnny became her mentor. After each appearance, he'd give her notes, tell her what worked, what didn't, push her to be braver, more honest, more willing to take risks. He defended her when network executives complained that her humor was too edgy, told them, "She's the future of comedy. You just don't see it yet." He featured her in sketches, let her sit in as guest host when he was away, making her the first woman to ever host The Tonight Show. And slowly, Joan Rivers became a star. In 1983, Johnny made Joan his permanent guest host. It was unprecedented. The Tonight Show had never had a permanent guest host before, and certainly never a woman. But Johnny didn't care about precedent. He cared about talent, and Joan had it. Being permanent guest host meant Joan was on track to potentially take over The Tonight Show someday. It meant Johnny trusted her not just as a comedian, but as his successor. For Joan, who'd spent years being told women couldn't be funny, who'd bombed on that stage 18 years earlier, it was vindication, proof that she'd been right all along, that she was funny, that she belonged. And she never forgot who'd made it possible. Johnny and Joan's relationship was more than mentor and student. They became friends, real friends. Joan would later say that Johnny was like a father to her, the person who believed in her when nobody else did, who pushed her to be better, who protected her in an industry that didn't want women to succeed. Johnny rarely gave compliments, but he'd tell people, "Joan is one of the funniest people I've ever met, male or female. She's just funny." For nearly 20 years, their friendship defined both their careers. Joan became a comedy legend. Johnny's reputation as a talent scout was cemented. Everyone knew if Johnny Carson believed in you, you were the real deal. But then, in 1986, something happened that nobody saw coming. Fox offered Joan her own show, a late-night show that would compete directly with Johnny. Joan said yes, and Johnny never spoke to her again. The betrayal, as Johnny saw it, was complete. Joan had taken everything he'd given her, the platform, the mentorship, the trust, and used it to compete against him. Joan tried to explain. She'd called Johnny before accepting the Fox offer. He wasn't in. She left messages. He never called back. She thought his silence meant approval. It didn't. Johnny felt betrayed. In his mind, Joan had chosen ambition over loyalty. She'd become his competition after he'd made her career. He never spoke to her again. Not when her Fox show failed. Not when her husband committed suicide. Not in all the years that followed. Joan would say years later that losing Johnny's friendship was one of the deepest pains of her life. "He gave me everything," she said, "and then I lost him. I'd give anything to talk to him one more time, to explain, to thank him properly." But Johnny never relented. When he died in 2005, Joan wasn't invited to the funeral. The story of Johnny and Joan is complicated. It's a story about mentorship and betrayal, about loyalty and ambition, about how the people who lift us up can also be the ones we hurt the most. But here's the truth that gets lost in the drama of how it ended. Johnny Carson saved Joan Rivers' career. That night in March 1965, when Joan bombed and wanted to quit, Johnny saw something nobody else saw. He gave her a second chance when she didn't deserve one. He mentored her, promoted her, defended her, and made her a star. Without Johnny, there would be no Joan Rivers. She said so herself. And despite how it ended, despite the years of silence and hurt, Joan never stopped being grateful. In 2014, just months before she died, Joan was asked about Johnny in an interview. She started crying. "He saved my life," she said. "Professionally, absolutely, but also personally. He made me believe in myself when I didn't. He showed me that I was funny, that I belonged, that I could do this." "Do you wish you could tell him that?" the interviewer asked. "Every day," Joan said. "Every single day." The interviewer asked one more question. "If you could talk to Johnny one more time, what would you say?" Joan thought for a long moment. "I'd say thank you for seeing something in me when nobody else did, for refusing to let me quit, for betting on me when I was a nobody. And I'd say I'm sorry for hurting him, for letting ambition get in the way of the most important friendship of my life." The story of Johnny and Joan reminds us of something important. The people who change our lives aren't always the ones who stay in them forever. Sometimes the greatest gift someone can give you is believing in you when you don't believe in yourself, pushing you when you want to quit, seeing potential when everyone else sees failure. Johnny Carson did that for Joan Rivers. He took a bombing comedian and made her a star. Not because he had to, not because it was good for ratings, but because he saw talent and refused to let it go to waste. Yes, their friendship ended in hurt and silence. Yes, the betrayal was real. Yes, both of them carried that pain for years. But that doesn't diminish what Johnny did for Joan, or what Joan became because of it. It all started on March 17, 1965, a night when a comedian bombed so badly she wanted to quit. A night when Johnny Carson could have let her walk away, could have said, "She's not ready, let her go." But he didn't. He followed her backstage, told her she was funny, gave her a second chance, and then 17 more. He bet on her, and she became one of the greatest comedians in history. That's the real story, not the falling out, not the years of silence, but the moment when someone saw potential in failure, when someone refused to let talent go to waste, when someone said, "You're better than you think you are. Let me prove it to you." Joan Rivers bombed on The Tonight Show, and Johnny Carson turned that bomb into a career that changed comedy forever. If this story inspired you, hit that subscribe button. Share it with someone who's thinking about quitting, who's had a bad day, a bad performance, a moment where they think they're not good enough. Comment below about a time someone believed in you when you didn't believe in yourself. And hit that notification bell for more stories about the moments that change lives. Because sometimes, all it takes is one person refusing to let you quit. One person saying, "You're better than this. Try again." Joan Rivers tried again, and she became a legend. All because Johnny Carson refused to let her leave.